Hello, everybody. My name is Andres Filbon from TU Delft, and I'm going to present you a paper with other colleagues from TU Delft, in which we face the problem of users that are, or passengers that are traveling together, and how to share the total cost of the trip among them when we want to align optimal solutions with users' choices. So let me first introduce the topic. In emerging mobility systems, it is usual that groups are formed dynamically. You can think of BlaBlaCar, you can think of Uberpool, etc. So a natural question is, okay, when I have a group of users and there are some total costs, how I divide them into the users? And the answer to that question will actually affect which groups are created, which leads to a tension between individual decisions and optimal decisions, which is something that happens a lot in transportation science, like the well-known Bryce or Down-Thompson paradoxes. So we are interested in two questions. First of all, what is the best equilibrium that the system might offer, which is defined as the price of stability, instead of the price of anarchy, which is the worst equilibrium? We think it is natural to consider this question because typically there is a central operator of the system. So the central operator can suggest which groups to use, and what we care is that users are going to happy and are going to accept that suggestion. And second, okay, is it possible to induce good equilibria through fares? So let me show you an example. 3 users need to travel to a similar or same destination. The green car is just showing which routes should be followed if they are all traveling together. So these are the total costs per group that are calculated somehow. Doesn't matter how, but you can think that they encompass everything. User cost, waiting in vehicle, plus gasoline, plus driver, whatever. And these are 2 different ways to split the cost. In the first way, there is no equilibrium. So briefly, you can see that because traveling alone is always the worst for everybody. But if user 1 is traveling with user 2, user 1 will say bye-bye, I prefer to travel with user 3. But then user 3 will say bye-bye, I want to travel with user 2, and so on and so on. So there is no equilibrium. In the second solution, or in the second way to split the cost, the optimal solution, which are the 2 gray rows, is exactly the same as the equilibrium. You can see that easily because for users 1 and 2, the best absolute solution is to travel together, so this group will be created immediately, and therefore for user 3, there is no other choice than traveling by herself. So my message here is that how to split the cost can have very relevant effects on what's happening in the system. So in order to analyze this formally, we're going to propose a game. Before that, we consider that there are n passengers that need to travel, and there is a set of feasible groups. Each group is a subset of passengers. And for each group, there is some total cost that, as I said before, encompasses everything, users, operators. If you want, you can consider externalities or whatever. And we always assume that traveling alone is feasible. So you can always choose to travel alone. The optimal solution, this is the first notion we're interested, is a set of groups such that each passenger belongs to exactly one group. So somebody tells the users how to group, minimizing the total costs of the system. So this is very similar to set cover. Actually, it's super easy to show that they are equivalent. Therefore, this is an NP-hard problem. Nevertheless, we are going to assume that we know the solution. We know the optimal solution. You can think that standard solvers, state-of-the-art solvers, typically can solve exactly or approximately set cover even in large instances. So we assume that we know the optimal solution. On the other hand, for the equilibrium, there is an individual cost that for now we assume it is exogenous. So for each user and for each group containing the user, there is an individual cost. And for now, we will not impose that they need to have the total cost. Of course, sometimes that will happen, but we prefer to leave that more flexible for now, more general. So the individual costs are the relevant for equilibria because users want to minimize their individual cost. But the question is, okay, how do we define an equilibria? Because there is an interplay of the users here. So we define the game, the co-travelers game, in which the players of the game are the travelers, and each player chooses a strategy as usual, and her strategies are the possible groups that she belongs in. So what's the disutility of choosing a group? Well, there are two options. If the group you chose is also chosen by all the other members of that group, then the group is taking place, you are traveling together, and you face the corresponding cost. If not everybody chooses that group, so at least one person doesn't, then the group is not taking place, and you are not traveling, and then your disutility is plus infinity. So now we look which are the equilibrium notions in this context. So the traditional notion is the Nash equilibrium. Yeah, Nash equilibrium meaning that nobody can unilaterally improve their situation. So two straightforward results. In any Nash equilibrium, everybody is playing only pure strategies. There are no probabilities here. And the second one is that in every Nash equilibrium, nobody will have this plus infinity disutility. And yeah, that happens basically because traveling solo is always feasible. So why would you stay in with a strategy in which you pay plus infinity if you can travel by yourself and pay less than that? Therefore, we will forget about this U and we will directly use the costs because they are the same, and we will assume only pure strategies and that this never happens. So first lemma, a set of strategies is a Nash equilibrium if nobody can leave their current group to travel alone and get to a better situation. Yeah, basically what we are saying here is that the only unilateral decision that you can take in this game is to leave your current group to travel alone. And a problematic corollary from this lemma is that if everybody is traveling alone, this condition is trivially fulfilled for everybody, so that's a Nash equilibrium. It's problematic because these are shared mobility modes, so why would we want everybody to travel alone? That doesn't make much sense. So the conclusion is that this notion of equilibrium is actually too weak. Everybody travels, assuming that there is no coordination among the players, so that the only thing you can do is to travel by yourself or to stay in your current group, we want somehow that some players can coordinate. However, the traditional strong equilibrium notion is too strong. Strong equilibrium means that everybody can coordinate with everybody. But if we have hundreds or thousands of users, yeah, that can mean millions of groups. So it doesn't make much sense that you can coordinate with anyone. So what we are going to do now is to propose three intermediate equilibrium notions that we believe make sense in the context of this shared mobility system. So the first one is what we define as the hermetic equilibrium. So the idea is that if you are in a group, it is very easy to coordinate with the other members of that group. So if you are traveling with 4 players, you can say, hey, player 2, player 3, if we abandon the big group and we form a smaller group, we will be happy. So when that can happen, that's not an equilibrium. So the hermetic equilibrium means that no subgroup wants to live jointly their current groups. And yeah, that makes sense. The problem is that everybody traveling alone is still an equilibrium. The second definition is the unmergeable equilibrium. So the idea of the unmergeable equilibrium is that we don't, if groups can be merged and everybody improve their situation, that should be allowed to happen. It doesn't make much sense that everybody can be better, but that coordination cannot occur, especially because we are assuming that there is a central controller that is going to suggest groups. So the unmergeable equilibrium means that it is impossible to find 2 groups that can be merged. That already happened. And it is very easy to see that there is always at least one unmergeable equilibrium, basically looking only at very big groups, so that you cannot merge them with any other group. But yeah, so here it's small. Here the equilibrium, the trivial equilibrium, is with small groups. Here the trivial equilibrium is with large groups. And there are instances in which there is no solution that fulfills both conditions at the same time. The third notion is the semi-individual equilibrium. So For the Nash equilibrium, it's always something like individual. The problem is that you can only leave your current group to travel by yourself. But a natural extension is that you can leave your group to join a different group. But for that to happen, the new group needs to be willing to accept you, meaning that everybody is going to be better when you are there. So basically, the semi-individual equilibrium means that that cannot happen, so nobody can leave their current group to join a new one and be accepted. And there are some instances in which there is no semi-individual equilibrium, and actually determining if there is an equilibrium or not isn't complete. So far we have assumed that individual costs are exogenous, but the title of the presentation is how to split the cost, meaning that we actually want to define the costs endogenously somehow. So given the cost of a group, how to define the individual costs, and we aim for protocols to create those definitions that are, first of all, oblivious, meaning that the cost of a user depends only on her co-travelers, not on the rest of the system. We impose that because it doesn't make much sense that, okay, you are going to travel with these guys, but your cost also depends on this other car. Users probably won't be happy with those type of rules. And hopefully it is budget balanced, meaning that the individual costs sum up exactly the cost of the group. And if that's not the case, we want them to be at least overcharging, meaning that they are enough to cover the cost of the group. So the first protocol is the residual based, meaning that all the players of a group first pay what they would face if they travel alone. So for instance, proportional to the distance of their trip. When everybody does that, we are probably overpaying or we are not paying enough. So there is some residual, and the residual is split among the players somehow with the only rule that the sign is the same for everybody. So if we are overpaying, then we all get some money back, or vice versa. And if a natural way is that everything is proportional to the individual cost. And when this is done, whatever we split the residuals, every optimal solution is an unmergeable equilibrium. So the price of stability is 1 if we are considering the unmergeable equilibrium motion. The second protocol is externality based. Yeah, this is inspired by economics. There it's very common that you have to pay by the externalities you impose to the rest of the system. You can think of Pigouvian taxes or Vicky-Clark Groves auctions. So in this case, what you are imposing to the rest of your group is the cost of the group minus what the group would cost if you leave it. So this is not budget balanced because costs are whatever, but can easily be made overcharging basically by adding some constant here. And the relevant theorem in this case is that this protocol makes every optimal solution ride-sharing semi-individual equilibrium. So again, price of stability equal to 1 if this is the correct notion of equilibrium. The final one, which I'm going to define in a less precise way because it's more complicated, you can see it in the paper if you want to see the precise definition. The intuition is that the cost for the users in a group depend on the subgroups that they belong to. Yeah, so basically what we want to prevent is that you find a subgroup and you all want to live together. Yeah, the idea of the hermetic groups. And in this case, the theorem is that this protocol makes every optimal solution both a hermetic equilibrium and also an unmergeable equilibrium. So this is more powerful because it's useful for 2 types of definitions. And this is the synthesis. So depending on the equilibrium notion, we have different protocols that can be used to get a price of stability equal to 1. So if we want to say it in a more intuitive way, we can use this first. We can use this individual cost, and when the system suggests the optimal solution to the individuals, they are going to be happy with that solution and they are going to accept it because it's an equilibrium. That's the best that they can have. So a synthesis, we are studying how to split the cost among users that are sharing a ride in order to match optimal and equilibrium solutions. To do this, we model the situation as a game, but we argue that the traditional notions of equilibrium, Nash and strong, are not appropriate because Nash is too weak and strong is too strong. Therefore, we proposed 3 alternative intermediate notions of equilibrium, and we proposed cost-sharing protocols that make the optimal solution also an equilibrium for these notions of equilibrium. And we also ran numerical simulations that are in the paper and not here in the presentation. And of course, they confirm all our theoretical findings. And also they revealed that the chance of suggesting the groups is crucial because the price of anarchy is quite high. So it is very important that the operator of the group is able to propose how to create the groups. So thank you very much for your attention. This is the paper. You can see it online. It's still up for print. And it's, of course, under review now in a journal. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer all of your questions or comments. Bye-bye.